can you put the knife down, please, sir? Sir, no, sir, don't stab it. No, stop stabbing. Stop. Oh, hold on. It's LeBron. LeBron.
Hold on, it's LeBron.
Hey, yeah, it's me again. Listen, I'm out here at this disturbance call, and there's a guy trying to stab another guy with a knife. What do you think I should do? Why does that matter? Okay, well, they're both black. One guy's trying to stab another guy with a knife. Deadly force is completely justified. I see. So you don't care if a black person kills another black person, but you do care if a white cop kills a black person, even if he's doing it to save the life of another black person? I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but then again, you are really good at basketball, so I guess I'll take your word for it. All right. Yep. Okay. All right. Thanks, LeBron. Michael Jordan's the GOAT. What? Nothing.
I know people get tired of hearing me say it, but we are scared as black people in America. Black men, black women, black kids, we are terrified because you don't know. You have no idea. You have no idea how that cop that day left the house. You don't know if he woke up on the good side of the bed. You don't know if he woke up on the wrong side of the bed. You don't know if he had an argument at home with a significant other. You know if one of his kids said something crazy to him and he left the house steaming. Or maybe he just left the house saying that today is going to be the end for one of these black people. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels.
Because I think that LeBron James makes a point, and a very salient point when he points out how you don't know what we go through. There are a lot of details to various incidents, not George Floyd, because we saw that on video. But others you can look at and you can interpret any way you want to, all right? Why did this man go back to the car? Why did this guy fight with the police officer and run away and all of this other stuff? Here's what I want white America to understand. Dylan Roof goes to a church in South Carolina years ago and shoots 9 black worshipers. There is a manhunt for this person. Not only is he arrested, they stopped him at, I don't know whether it was McDonald's or Burger King. They actually stopped to get him food and bringing him into custody because he was hungry. But an unarmed black man ends up getting shot. See, the problem that exists with white America is that this is what a lot of folks in white America are not getting. Because that's the question that black folks continuously ask, facetiously, no doubt. But we ask the question nevertheless, how is it that a white person can find themselves committing acts of violence, but they get arrested, but unarmed black men are getting shot? That is the fear that LeBron James, I believe, was alluding to when he said, you just don't get it. How scared we wake up every day. We have children. We're wondering what's going to happen to us. And it could be contingent upon the mood of a police officer. I've been on national television on this show where I pointed out how I was in New York City driving with my daughter, who I believe was like around 8 at the time. And I'm driving down Amsterdam Avenue going towards Harlem. I think I'm like at between 79th and 80th Street. And I get pulled over by a cop. The next thing you know, it's 3 squad cars pulling me over. And the cop said, show me your license and registration. I said, here, sir, because I always roll down all 4 windows. I put my hands on the steering wheel. My daughter is in the back seat. And the cop says, show me your license and registration. And I handed it to him, but I said, officer, what did I do? And he starts screaming at me and pointing at me and don't effing talk back to me and all of this stuff. And then puts his hand on his gun. And it wasn't until the other officer came to him and the officer said, oh, and he said the S word, oh. And then he grabs the officer, pulls him away. And then the officer comes back to me, hands me my license and registration. Have a nice day. So evidently the officer noticed who I was and let me go. The other officer I'm talking about here. What if he were not there? What if that was the only officer that had showed up with his partner? Clearly he didn't care that my daughter was in the background. I just told you all 4 windows were down. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. And so when you see somebody, a police officer, and they come up to you and LeBron says, I don't know what kind of mood they're going to be in. It resonates because that's the issue. We see pundits all over the place and people speaking about how the numbers equate. There are white people that got shot. There are white people that's getting arrested. There are white people that are being thrown in jail, blah, 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 blah. That's not the issue. The issue is the innate fear that has been instilled in black people because of the violence perpetrated against us when there's no cause for it. If you are unarmed, if you are handcuffed behind your back, why are you getting shot? Why do you have a knee on your neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds? These are the kind of things that we're talking about, and we don't hear about that stuff happening in the white community. Now, if it is happening, and you have proof that it's happening, then that's a different discussion for another day. But throughout our history, that hasn't been the issue. It hasn't been discussed because we know that black folks are treated differently than white folks, that obviously we understand some of the reasons why when we talk about systemic racism and we're talking about society, that doesn't mean every white person is racist. If you are not racist and you are not the one engaging in systemic racism and you are not the one that are trying to look down on people because they are of a different culture, a different pigmentation and things of that nature, we're not talking about you.
Dominant? Not so dominant. Huge weight difference, guys. I don't understand how we can mistake a taser for a gun or a gun for a taser. If you're in the heat of the moment and you do something like that, you shouldn't be doing this job. Because nobody likes a bad cop more than a good cop. I can tell you that straight up. I'm not going to put my life on the line to try and, fix your stupidity and deal with restoring the peace with my public that I serve just because of your stupid actions. It makes no sense. 99% of our job is communication. You don't gotta be quick to pull out a gun or a taser on somebody and think everybody's a threat. Not everybody's a threat. Try talking to them. Get to know them people.
It's very uncomfortable to talk about race. It's not something I do. I am feeling apprehensive because I think there's a lot of reasons why I feel like I should be able to talk about race.
I don't want to say anything, that would offend anyone. It's a very touchy subject. It's still difficult, even if you feel like you're on the right side of it, to have a dialogue about it.
Especially for white people, because we don't want to see if the racism that we may be holding on to.
I don't know. Maybe I am racist. I certainly don't like to think that I am. And I think that's too because the perception, in this society, perception of a racist is a guy in a robe.
Now I understand that it's a system of advantages and disadvantages based on race. So as much as there's the disadvantage piece of it, there's the advantage piece of it, which is what I experience as a white person.
I want to bring up race, and I want to bring it up in a frame that helps my children think that there's no difference. But the mere fact that I might be bringing it up could suggest that there is a difference.
I remember asking a friend of my father's who's black why he was called black, because his skin was brown. And I've learned that lots of people that are white ask this question, and maybe they also received the answer that I got from my parents, which was like, oh my gosh, we're so sorry that she asked that, and it's just a term, like, move on.
One of my third grade students seemed pretty rocked after the Eric Garner case or death, and came up to me and said, why, when you were little, like, were you worried about this stuff too? And I knew it he was talking about before. I mean, I didn't say, what do you mean, what stuff? I didn't want to, play dumb. And I said, no, like, I didn't have to be, and that's not fair. And that was really hard because he just kind of sat there, and it honestly seemed like the first time that he had considered the fact that not everyone had to think about race all the time.
I know that I'm white, and I guess I'm part of that collection. But I don't think about being white. I don't.
I really did not know that I had a racial identity. I knew I was white. I had no idea what that meant, how that had shaped my outlook on life, how that had shaped my sense of optimism, sense of belonging, sense of safety, sense of feeling entitled to go help children that I thought were a part of a community that couldn't figure out how to help themselves.
I think that impulse, that kind of colorblindness impulse, comes mostly from white people. Like, I've never heard, I don't know. I'm sure it comes from all people of all kinds, but I've heard it most from white people who are saying, like, let's do this as a way of getting past this racism thing. And I think in part it comes from a sense of shame and guilt about what racism has done, and kind of how racism was built by white people.
I don't want to be ashamed of being, and plus I'm a male. It's like every group out there can be pissed off at me because I'm white and a male. And that's a weird kind of burden that some people do feel, and I certainly feel it sometimes from people that I'm privileged, I get stuff that other people don't get.
I think we're all implicated in a racist system, and I play my part in it as a white person. So I do have individual responsibility and accountability. I mean, I'm part of the system, and I do things that both perpetuate it, and I try to certainly do things that challenge it.
I realize I've never said anything. When I've heard racist jokes, when I've heard racist comments, I've never said anything. I've never spoken up and said, hey, that's racist. Not once.
In my mind, I'm not involved in any conflict that involves race. I've only been the beneficiary of it. So to talk about it is I don't think I would sound very wise.
Being white means that I have the privilege to think that I'm not affected by racism, or that I don't even have a race, because I have all these other things like a gender and a sexual orientation, and those are pretty neat, so I don't have a race, but I do, and I'm white.
Look at some of the more prominent African Americans, but no, we make up a small portion. We're disproportionate. We're not the norm in black society. So if you don't experience that, you don't know what exists. So stop trying to fool me into saying, well, Shannon, you crazy. It's because you taking too many hits to the head. That doesn't happen in America.
That's not true.
I know that it does. And I'm not saying, look, all cops are not bad.
Right.
All blacks are not thugs. All whites are not racist. Mm-hmm. All I'm saying is that you judge each individual person on his or her merits.
Yep.
So when a cop does something, good cops call him out.
You got it.
Because if you are complicit, you are encouraging it and you are condoning it. See, when Pookie shoots Ray Ray, they find Pookie and he gets 25 to life. Mm-hmm. Officer Johnson shoots Dave, he gets paid leave and nothing happens. That's True. What we want. We want equal justice for equal crime. Mm-hmm. We want equal pay for equal work. That's what we want. We want to be treated. The Constitution says all men are created equal. Well, then why do we have to have all these laws and all these amendments and all these acts just to make sure everybody's created equal? They say one nation under God. If we're one nation, why are we treated so unequal? That's what I want to know.
It's a great question.
There's a reason why they put all these in place. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, it doesn't apply when it comes to certain groups. We want to know why. That's all. I don't ask for, my grandmother say, she really never called my brother and I. She was always call us boy. She'd say son. She say, Boy, if you give a man your word, you do what you say you're going to do. If a man gives you an honest salary, you give him an honest day's work. And I remember me and my cousin, we're making $5 a day, working 7 to 7. We called it can't to can't. When you went to work, you couldn't see. When you came home, you couldn't see.
I like that.
We was making $5 a day. And I let my cousin, he was 2 years older than me, talk me into going to ask Mr. Joe for a raise. I said, Mr. Joe, we've been working hard. I mean, we work hard, Mr. Joe. We need a raise. He called me Pee-wee because I was real small. He said, Pee-wee, how much you think you should get? I just threw out $1. $1. So so now instead of making $5 a day, we're making $6 a day. So me and my cousin, we feeling really good about ourselves. So instead of working as hard as we normally do, we started playing and lollygagging. My sister tells my grandma, Granny, Shannon and Lanny was playing in the field. My grandma didn't say a word. The next morning, she goes outside. She said, Joe, I heard you gave them boys a raise. Libby told me they were playing. Take it back. Take it back, because you didn't earn it. I want what I earn. I want my respect. I want my dignity. Give me that. And if you're not going to give it to me, don't deny it from me.
Yep.
That's all I'm asking. Skip.
I got it.
That's all we asking be it minorities, be it black or Latino, be it women, be it the LBG community. That's all we ask. We're asking for our respect and our dignity. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less.
I decided to pursue law enforcement for the basic reason of I had to have a job that gave meaning to my life.
I wasn't able to become a police officer when I got out of college because departments weren't hiring women. And so I didn't become a police officer until 15 years later.
I felt that I wanted to come in and change, the way that the police department operated and make it more cohesive and integrated and, help people out. I like helping people.
I thought that I could do a better job as a police officer than some of the people that I saw doing the job and had interacted with growing up. There is a latitude of power that a police officer has. And I sought to exercise that power for the good of the people that I interacted with, provided you weren't a criminal.
So my father was a police officer. He worked in Motorcycle 2. After I came on the job, my sister came on the job. So it was something I always wanted to do.
It was very frustrating that we're talking back in the 70s to always be stopped by the police department. And I could say my father was a police officer, but that didn't matter.
My experience is that some officers might target African American kids. I think teenagers in particular, whatever racial characteristics they have, may be targeted.
Would I stop 4 or 5 black guys that are in a white neighborhood? Yeah, if they're not supposed to be there, I would say, what's up, guys? Even if I'm in a patrol car, I would roll up on them and say, what's up, guys? What are you doing? And if they gave me an attitude, that would raise my suspicion. If I see a white kid or a bunch of white kids walking into that neighborhood where they're not supposed to be, there's a couple of things going on. They're there for a fight, or they're there for drugs, or maybe to buy a gun, or maybe to, who knows? But they're usually not there. I would stop them.
A lot of people would say, well, it's your own fault. If you weren't robbing people, if you weren't shooting each other, the black on black thing, well, I never hear white on white crime because it's white on white crime. I never hear that term. But the focus of media and of the departments is upon negative behavior of black people.
How many incidents have we had since that Staten Island incidents like that? What is it, a year later? 1 or 2? Maybe 3? I mean, it's not rampant. It's not out of control.
Each one has to be taken on its individual merits. I've not examined directly any of them, but I would say that I don't call somebody who shoots somebody in the back a police officer. My inclination is to call them a murderer.
I say anyone that thinks that the police department is going out and they have a motive to go and kill black people, white people, Asians, anyone like that is delusional. There is nothing like that.
I believe most officers are afraid to talk about the realities of the negative aspects of policing. Number one, they fear that if they're in an incident where they need backup, they call it 1013, and guys figure, well, you're not part of the crew, they won't respond. They won't get backup when they need it. Secondly, I believe a lot of guys are afraid of what the department would try and do to them. So they keep their mouths shut.
Just because you're a cop doesn't mean that you don't have rules to follow. And I always felt that you should follow the rules because that could be your family member and you don't want anybody's rights to be violated.
I think that we have to recognize that the police are the most obvious object of disdain. However, they're not the problem. They may have problems, but they're not the exclusive problem.
And in the precinct that I live in, which happens to be the 77th precinct, they are going to reinstitute this policing where cops are assigned to a certain area, and they need to know the business owners, they need to know the people, and people really need to walk up to them and say hi and know the officers too. It works both ways.
I don't understand why people just, get a job, go to school. Why do you have to protest against the cops? The cops are there to help you. I don't understand why everybody's so angry about something, an order that doesn't exist.
It's the responsibility of the white community. It's the responsibility of our leaders to realize black people are not shouting racism and discrimination and exploitation for no reason. They're not marching. They're not protesting because they have nothing else to do. Their problems are real.
Racism is such a part of the system, of the network of the American society, that people, white and black, don't realize when racism is being executed for them or against them.
That we've obviously touched a raw spot in our national psyche, not just in policing, but in everything else, alarms me, concerns me, and makes me feel that not just the policing community, but every other community needs to take notice.
I think the Latino identity is pretty confusing to me because oftentimes I find it in a little checkbox on a form and I'm confused on whether I should put Latino or Hispanic, but I'm Mexican.
As Latin Americans, as Hispanics in the U.S., there's a community that gets built regardless of which specific country you're coming from.
In our history is a history of African people, indigenous people, Europeans, conquistadores, all these different people colliding, many times not with their consent. So that informs all these loaded issues people have.
It's like navigating three identities. If you're from the States, you're American, you're Black, and you're Latina. And furthermore, wherever country that you identify in coming from. And that's a lot to navigate.
But at this point in my life, I actually don't identify as what I'm on, and it's something that I guess a lot of young immigrants sort of feel, where there's this saying ni de aquí ni de allá, not from there, not from here. In trying to blend in with the culture in America, I gave up a lot of what I grew up with. Maybe I saw it as something that was kind of shameful or in the way. I wanted to dress like my friends in America. I wanted to talk like them. I wanted to be like them, listen to the same music. I started listening to country music.
I got all these crazy questions like, did you come here in a canoe? And do you know what snow is? And do you live in a hut in Puerto Rico?
I thought my name was Spick until I was about 13. And that was my first awareness that race was an issue.
People say, oh, you look like a white dude. In some contexts, not in all contexts, depends where I am, depends who I'm with, depends whole lot of things. Depends what language I'm speaking. But however I look, when I leave my name, I can't get a phone call back about an apartment in New York City. And this isn't like 10 places I call. This is like 30.
And I remember telling a kid one time, I was like, let me tell you, the Ku Klux Klan comes here and they see your last name, you're going too, bro. You know? And the kids are like, what are you talking about? And it was like a big thing.
People generally, unless I speak Spanish, people assume right away, that I'm African American, that I'm black. It's just one of those things. It may be the deep voice, it may be the color of my skin.
Because I talk white, I'm not Dominican, or I'm not black, or I'm not Afro-Latina, or whoever people perceive me as of being. And that hurt, and that still hurts.
Because one of my daughters is lighter than the other, they had blackness issues. And I remember my oldest daughter telling my youngest daughter that she was black and her hair. She said something, and I remember crying, like immediately, like, oh my God. No. And I had to sit them down and talk to them about our roots and that everything that they learned from the family was wrong.
I feel like I wanted more of my culture. I grew up, there was a point I stopped speaking Spanish to her, and I still don't speak to her in Spanish. So I feel like something was lost, and I don't know if it was just because she was busy raising 5 kids and didn't really think about culture in that way and how I would come to identify myself.
Growing up, like this, as a young teenager, I told people I was Puerto Rican, which is completely, which is right. But at a particular point when I became a little more politicized, I was definitely more of a black nationalist than I was a Puerto Rican nationalist. Maybe because the concept of black nationalism and the black liberation movement is so much more accessible. There isn't a language issue. So yeah, I totally was reading Malcolm and Marcus and James Baldwin and Huey Newton before I read any of the Puerto Rican nationalists.
Either you're black or you're white, and if you're like kind of in the middle, you kind of like don't want to be in the middle. A lot of us want to be white. But we're still brown. We're still color. We still have color. We're still, according to what the institution is telling us, what race is based on your skin color. So you're like, I'm brown. So that's kind of like where it came. Like I'm not black, and I'm not white, and I don't want to be white. So I'm kind of brown, and this is kind of like a thing that's there.
If you are closer to being white, you are supreme. If you are not, you are less than. And to me, that's how I've understood it. And that's why I think it's very important that Latinos who look like me say, you identify as Latino, cool. Colombiano, cool. Whatever else. But you benefit from light skin privilege. The fact that you have ojos claros, people want to fetishize that. Understand what that means. However much I might want to say, oh my gosh, I'm so special because I have green eyes. You're perpetuating white supremacy by running with that.
I'll talk to a young girl, a young teenager, and she'll say, I'm not white enough to fit into mainstream society. I'm not Black American enough to fit in that faction of society. And I'm like, but you know what? You're the best person to be kind of like a connector between both, because in you is everything. And being Latino in an American kind of New World way is basically being a physical embodiment of how America began as we know it. So you're every woman. So for me, being Latino is being phenomenal.
As a black woman who was a black girl, I see the attack on us comes in a very different form. In some ways, it comes in the same form. People do experience racial profiling and police brutality, but sometimes you come across women who have not had that direct interaction. But we're attacked in so many nuanced ways.
So you have internal race issues within our own culture, and then the external race issue, and then your mothering issue around race. So for me, race and being a woman of color is so multi-layered. It's like you can excavate all day.
2 uniformed security guards walked over to us
one white, one Latino, and began to ask us questions about what we were doing in the lobby of that hotel, if we were a guest. Quickly responded and said that I was in fact a guest. I was asked details, my name, what room, and it was at this point that I became very upset.
And then you start to wonder, well, what other difference could it be if you're a white cop, I'm a black female? What other difference, what else could I have done to piss you off this much? It just starts to then look racial.
We actually had to bring in a white colleague from the Justice Conference before anyone could get an official response from the hotel.
I've had people focus on my hair not being professional enough. I had an executive director actually pull me into a room, and it went down a path of like, you know, just letting you know, like, I don't think that you're professional enough. And I kind of had to go through this whole, I had to actually pull back because I felt like I couldn't be emotional.
All the other chorus girls were white. And I remember going up to the person in charge of costuming and saying, you know, why is it that we're dressed this way? Why is our hair doing this weird, just lumped together thing, and all the other girls get to do curls and pretty things? And she was like, yeah, but your hair can't do that. And I was like, you never asked me. But it, for me, was really hard because I just wanted to dance and sing and be in the play. And I was being told, like, you're not good enough, your hair isn't good enough, your clothes aren't good enough. And we're going to make sure everybody notices that you're black and everybody else isn't.
And that colored my own thinking about myself. And I was like, maybe I am unattractive. Maybe I am, like, this monster. But then I'd call my mom and she'd be like, don't listen to them. Obviously, I gave birth to you and I'm gorgeous, so obviously you have to be gorgeous. So I whenever I always felt that, I'd always think about that.
There was a huge population of black girls who weren't dating anyone, and I wondered why that was, because in my eyes they seemed to be beautiful and attractive and smart and intelligent and ambitious, and it just didn't make any sense to me why they didn't have a boyfriend too. And that same consciousness is also what I'm thinking now at almost 25 years old, like, why that's the world that I still see today.
Once you accept your womanness, that's where your power comes from. It doesn't necessarily always come from your academic prowess. It doesn't always come from what you have. It comes from your perception of self. And when you accept that you're a woman and I'm a woman, hear me roar, that comes from a validation outside of yourself. And even if you want to say it doesn't, it does.
My father would buy me books. And before he would give me the books, he would painstakingly shade in the characters in the books in brown crayon. I still have some of these books. I mean, I had like Cinderella, she was brown, like all these things. And of course, as an older toddler, you notice that they've been drawn in because he's not an artist. And he would explain, as much as he could to a 5 or 6 year old why he was shading in these characters to look like me.
I don't have a daughter right now, but if I did have a daughter, I would tell her that she's beautiful, that she's intelligent, that she's all of these things all the time, because I feel like we don't hear that enough in the media. We don't get that attention.
What I would tell my daughter is not what was ever told me, and not something that I really thought I would ever say. But ultimately, to my girls, I want you to be happy. I want you to find joy in however you define it. Not what I want out of you, not what society imagines of you, not anyone's fantasies of you. Your happiness and your joy, and I have your back.
Racism means basically like
A large part of a race feels that they're superior to another race. And so not only do they believe that, but they act on it
examples would be in class. Sometimes I'd be the only black kid, and we read a book like, I don't know, Huck Finn, and then there's that uncomfortable moment, the magic word come up, and people would look at you and like, what's his reaction, and things like that.
I was walking home from school with this one white girl, and we just gotten off the bus, and we were almost home, and there were these group of black kids that just got out of school. And she was like, oh, let's cross the street. There's a group of black kids. I don't want to run into them. And so she told me, which I don't even know why she would do that.
I used to wear a sweatband, like, just to reinforce my wrist. And I had a teacher come up to me and say, you should take it off because it looks gang affiliated.
I've been in situations where, I had to cross the street because I didn't want to scare the white lady that was walking.
It would get to a point where I would start to count how many times a woman would clutch her bag.
When I was 16, I was leaving my mom's house in my pajamas, which had snowmen on them, with my brother, and we were actually stopped by the police rather aggressively. I've been stopped by the cops on my way between classes because we have two separate buildings, walking from one building to the other building, as my white students in the same class walk by me.
It's kind of upsetting because we live in a world where my mom has to be afraid when I walk outside from the people that are like meant to protect me. And I don't like when my mother feels like that. I love my mother. I want her to always be happy.
I walk tall, I keep my head up, very, try to be very articulate and polite. And so, of course, I was like, okay, I'm going to be fine because I act a certain way. And of course, that has absolutely nothing to do with it. The way people perceive you, is not up to you. My parents taught me, cops are your friends. You're supposed to, they're here to protect you. But all I'm seeing is the opposite. So how can I not be afraid when I feel like I'm being hunted? When I feel like I'm there to fill a quota?
We are in a so-called free society. And as a black man, we literally don't feel free. We don't know what freedom is.
Every time we're killed, the first thing you see on the news is, criminal record. Or something like that. So from the second the bullet hits us, already we're starting to be dehumanized.
With black people like myself, we don't get as many chances as they do. So you have to be aware and you have to watch out and you can't mess up.
This was an extremely emotionally taxing process for me in terms of coming to terms with maybe the nature of racism in my own life and in this country and in this world. And if you wait until somebody is 12, 13, and 14 to put that on them, it can be really difficult.
My dad, he's just like the honest one. He's like, listen, son, like there are things in this world, like you kind of have to watch out. He doesn't want me to live in fear, but he wants me to be aware.
I want people to know that I'm perfectly fine and I'm not gonna hurt anybody or do anything bad.
I should be judged about like who I am and what kind of person I am.
My parents would tell me, especially my mom, she would tell me, you have to endure, you have to muscle through it. And this is no different. It's a part of being a person of color in America.
And there's a certain comfortability associated with that because if I know that something is inevitable, then I know how to deal with it. Fortunately, I've had parents who have said, this is what you do.
Mom and Dad, I'll be fine because you did a good job raising me. You gave me all the resources and the time and the blood, sweat, and tears to make me a good man, an honorable man, and the foundation to survive in this country.
I want you to know that I will act in an appropriate manner and do everything that you told me to do because I do love you, and I know that everything you say is not for a reason and not just to talk, and I love you.